Hey everyone, so a few weeks back I was lucky enough to speak at a conference called the BCX Disrupt conference, and I had guys like will.i.am and Malcolm Gladwell, and it's Gladwell that I want to talk about specifically today. Gladwell took to the stage on day 2 and he spoke for 3 hours. He didn't have a single visual. It was amazing to watch. But afterwards people were tweeting and writing and coming up to me knowing I'm a presentation guy and saying, look at that, Gladwell was so amazing, didn't use a single slide, this is how all presentations should be. No, it's not. Gladwell's amazing in the same way bacon is amazing, right? Bacon is phenomenal. If you give me a piece of bacon, I eat it, it's delicious. But just because something is amazing, it doesn't mean it can't be improved by the addition of eggs. And in truth, while I enjoyed Gladwell a lot, there were certain times when he was talking to us about a specific battle that, had he showed us, and he was saying to us how the armies were set up and what was going on. He relied a lot on his audience doing a lot of the cognitive heavy lifting, trying to picture what this battlefield would look like and get it in order. Whereas if he'd just done away with his I don't use visuals thing and said when he was talking about the battlefield and said, well, have a look at this, and then shown a picture of that battle, then all of a sudden we would have been able to say, okay, now I can see exactly what it is. So I didn't have to use my cognitive bandwidth to do that. I could have used it for processing. Now, I don't want to take away from the guy because again, he is without a doubt my favorite speaker. But I think there's a cautionary tale I want to say, and the first thing is this. I saw a speaker speak a while ago and he spoke about elite athletes, and he told us what the elite athletes, the 99th percentile does in order to get to that, that final 1%, these Olympic athletes. And the next day I was doing a talk and I did a bit of a rebuttal and I said the problem is most of us were not the 99th percentile. Most of us don't have to turn off their phone while recording a video. That was embarrassing. Hold on. Hello, it's Richard. Hello. So the problem is that most of us aren't elite athletes. Most of us aren't trying to get to from 99 to 100. Most of us are trying to be above average. We're trying to get from 49 to 50 or 50 to 51. And it turns out the habits and the work ethic it takes to get from 50 to 51 is different from what it takes to get from 99 to 100. And in truth, yes, Gladwell is amazing and a master. But what Gladwell does really, really well is he worked with voice modulation. So he does what a lot of slides do for you, for the average speaker, for me, he does using something else. Let me explain to you. So I want you to imagine that you've got one of those old-fashioned typewriters, okay? And I want you to imagine that you are the typewriter, the typist, and your audience is the paper. Now what's happening is you're typing away, type. Now every now and then, if you remember those typewriters, that carriage moves, and then eventually the carriage gets to the end, and if you want to get it back again, you have to kind of push it back for it to go back in there, and then you can carry on typing. If you don't, you can keep on typing, but it's just like this blur at the end of the word. And that's what happens to speakers, is that we believe our audience is still there, we can see them, so we think they're still listening. But what's actually happened is they've gone into submarine mode. Right? They're staring at you, they're looking at you, but they are deep somewhere else. And you all know this because you've all been there. Now what most people do and what we explain to people is that when you actually take a slide and when you change slides, so if I'm speaking and all of a sudden the slides changed, all of a sudden you're looking again to see why the slide changed and what's happening there. And that is bringing you back into the moment again. And that act of bringing you back into the moment, even if that's all it did, if you were just changing from blue to red to yellow, even that would make your audience take notice and then pay attention to you again. Now, for me, it's that act alone. Take about everything else. That even then is worth it. Now, what Gladwell does is he does it with voice modulation. So he'll speak and he'll say, and then this man walked in. He was a big man. He was, 6 foot tall. He was this. And he would walk into a room and his entire presence would change. The room would be alive. They would wake up and they would see him. And he would wait. And he would sit and look at each and every one of them. And then he would drop his bomb and he would do this. Here's a clip of Gladwell. You can have a look at it. You can see what I mean.
Swear that if they're ever captured, they will not divulge a single detail of this particular device to the enemy, because it's imperative the enemy not get their hands on this absolutely central piece of technology.
So he uses voice modulation to do what most of us have to do with slides. And that's why I say the worry is, if you go the Gladwell method, you have to improve a whole lot more as a speaker in order to get to that level. But there's another thing. Gladwell's a great storyteller, and you can leave and he's telling you 25 minutes to give you one little thing, one little tale. He's trying to prove a point of a big story. You know, your pride can get in the way, or don't be overconfident. And he'll tell you a big long story. And if all you remember at the end of it is overconfidence is bad, you've won. But for the most part, most of you are standing up and doing a presentation, or you're doing something different. You're trying to sell something or get a message across. It's a different mandate. And there you actually often do need some slides, because you need to understand that your slides are not there for you. Your slides are there for your audience. It's not there for you to deliver your presentation, but for your audience to retain it. And the way that human beings work is we have what's called dual channel processing. We hear things and we see things and we map them together in our brain, and we then commit them to memory. And if you're only talking to somebody like I'm doing now, only one part of your brain is effectively working. That is the audible component. But if I can take a really good visual, and if I can take a picture of the battlefield and attach it to my description of this general, then all of a sudden you're committing something to memory in a different way. We've doubled up on what you're doing. So you're not Gladwell, right? That's the key. And to understand that slides are not the enemy. Bad slides are the enemy. Don't blame PowerPoint. I always say blaming PowerPoint for a bad presentation is like blaming a pan for a bad meal. It's not PowerPoint's fault. Gladwell is a master, and we should be like him as much as we can and emulate him as much as we can. But again, don't see he's just great bacon, okay? And bacon can always be improved by eggs. And your presentations can always be improved by great effective visuals, not just for you, but for your audience.